do something a little bit different. In the last few videos that I've made, I've primarily been doing typing-based videos, but I wanted to try to figure out how to incorporate some different triggers into my videos. So today we're going to still be doing a little bit of typing, but there's going to be a lot more explaining that's going on because we're going to start a series where we build a social media platform. Obviously, it's not going to scale or anything like that, but we're going to build something over the course of several videos. And to start that off, we're going to be kind of going through the system architecture of our platform. And with that said, this is probably the least entertaining portion. So this is probably the part where I myself would fall asleep. So we're gonna start in this video by looking at some of the data structures that we think we're gonna need, and then we will take a look at how we're going to be deploying the application to start with, and then once we go from there, we may look at how we might scale it in the future. It just depends on really how in depth we want to go. I may start on what we're gonna do, and then if you guys want to see maybe some ideas around how we would make this scale, we can do that in another video, because again, I imagine that these videos are going to be the easy ones to fall asleep to. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our social media app directory, and then from here I'm going to create a README. Now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the README file. I'm going to call this our social media app. And then there's some things that we need to take into consideration. So we're going to say tables, and let's talk about the tables that we're gonna need. So obviously if we are going to be having users, we're going to need a users table. For now on this, I think we can probably get by with a first name field, a last name field. Probably want to collect their email. That's probably how we'll sign them in. And then, of course, their password. This will be, obviously we won't store this in plain text, so we can probably note that. Here is that it'll be hashed in some way, and then stored in our database. And then something that I like to make sure that I do is I like to have a created at. Some people like to have an updated at to see the last time that an update happened. We might look at that in the future, but in our case, I don't know that we really need an updated at this current moment, and maybe that's something that we implement in the future if we, for some reason, think that would be needed. But typically, whenever I start a project, updated at isn't something that I'm really thinking about, just because whenever I start a project, honestly, I'm probably not going to have a drastic amount of users anyway. But because whenever I do create apps, I like to think of element deletions as soft deletes, and this is something that this is obviously going to vary depending on use case. But I like to start by thinking of things in the sense of a soft delete. So what does this mean? This means that if I go to delete my account, then the entity will still be in the database. It'll just have a deletion date. And then if I come back and I, for some reason, want to create my account again, I can pick up right from where I left off with all of my original settings. And this also helps, obviously, for, say, for enterprise. This helps for auditing purposes, etc., etc. But for this case, that's one reason why I really like to start there. I think that's probably good for now. The next thing that we can do is let's talk about what we're creating. So ultimately, let's think of this as, for now, we'll think of it as kind of a Instagram V1 without things like short form videos and such. Maybe we look at that in the future, but for now, let's just think of it as images with with some sort of blurb or text. So we'll talk about how all of that's going to be tied together. But let's think of that for the time being. So I think in our case we're gonna have posts. I almost forgot one thing that we definitely need is we need an ID. We're not gonna get very far in this without an ID. Yeah. So I don't know why it's formatting it that way. But anyway, now that we've got the ID added, we need another ID because we're gonna need a post ID. So the next thing we will need is, I'm going to say, content. Content will just be, if you think of Instagram, it would be like the short blurb of text that you add to your posts. We are going to need a image URL because our image, obviously, we're not going to store the image in the database. What we'll likely do is we'll have some sort of storage outside of our database, like an Amazon storage bucket or a Google storage bucket, in which we will store the image, and then that will provide us with a URL, and we'll take that URL and that's what we'll store in the database. And then whenever our application makes a request to our server will pull all that information in and return it to us, and then we'll be able to in some way take that image URL and use that to display in our application. We'll probably have to figure out how we want to secure that, how that's going to work. But for the time being, we just know that we want to store the image URL. At least that's the thought for now. This is going to have a user ID because we're going to want to know. Who posted this, and then we're going to want to have, again, a created at, because post. Maybe. Either way. Maybe not. We'll think about that as we go further. Again, we could have an updated ad here, which might be good if we want to allow someone to say update the content of the post. But for now, I think that that's probably more headache than it's worth. So for now, we're just going to do this, and then we'll see about the rest later. And then I would say let's something else that I want to add here, at least for now, is actually no. We'll come back to this. So the next thing that I want to have is likes. Now this table will likely be a cross. It's likely going to just be it's likely going to be a join table of sorts. So it will have a user ID and this is what I'm thinking for now, and then a post ID. So what I was thinking is I could just have like a like count or something like that on the posts table, but that doesn't really make it easy. That doesn't give us an easy way to track who liked the post. So currently you're able to tell that, right? Whenever you look at an Instagram post, you're able to tell who liked something. So currently we're not able to do that. So I would say we'll probably want to do that. I'm probably going to go ahead and give this an ID, although that's probably not going to matter so much at the moment. If anything, it just might help with some of our database maintenance going in the future. Yeah, so that's something. And then the next thing is we will go ahead and I'm going to say we're going to support comments in the beginning. So comments, obviously we're going to have an ID, a comment ID. I'm going to say we're going to have, I don't know what I want to, we'll just say content the same. Might want to change that in the future, don't know. But that's what I'll call it for now. And then we'll want to have a user ID and a post ID. So again, this is kind of like a join table almost, but in this sense, there will actually be some sort of content that's associated with it. So it's not as much like that. It's not as much like that as what the likes is. And then what we're going to do is, and then we'll have a created ad. Again, I'm going to avoid having an updated ad for now. We may circle back to that at some point, but for the time being, we're going to have this. And then we're going to have a deleted ad. And then I think that's all we're going to support for now. We could support comment likes also, but I feel like that maybe to keep things simple, I probably some things that we might want that for, but considering this is just something that we're building for a YouTube series, I don't think that's something that we really need to worry about. So just for context, we could probably, if we were to scale this, and let's say we were to monetize it with ads, we could potentially do some sort of like sentiment analysis on comments and like tie that to the users that are liking those comments, in order to drive like what ads we're feeding to our users. There's all sorts of things that we could potentially do, or try if we really wanted to. But again, I don't feel like this is not something that we're gonna be trying to put out there for the world to use. So that being said, we're just gonna stick with this for now, and then who knows? Maybe down the road, you guys will convince me that we want to deep dive on something else, on something like that. But yeah, so for now, let's move on. So we have a lot of stuff here. I think that there's probably going to be more. I just don't entirely know what other features we might want to implement, because we could theoretically do messages, and if we did messages, then that would be its own thing. So I don't think we want to support that for the time being. I'm not supporting analytics. I really just want to support the main feed for the time being, and then I guess something else that we can do for the user is let's do profile picture URL, and this will be similar to the image URL for posts. And normally that wouldn't be that big of a deal, but considering this is a social media application, that's probably something that we want to support. And then let's go ahead and say bio. I want to have a bio, and why not? We'll have a link also, because I know that that's something that Instagram supports. Let's also support tags. So ID, and I'm just gonna say title. And then for this, I'll create a post tags table. And let me get this put down, and I'll kind of talk about this a little more. This is just something I'm kind of thinking at the moment, but basically, we'll say tag ID and post ID. It'll just be kind of a join table. But the idea here is maybe we have it so that hashtags are trackable, so that it's easy. So that could contribute maybe to like Explore, like the Explore feature, the Explore tab, or what have you. But basically, like to where you could. So if you think about Instagram, there's the ability to click on specific tags and see posts may look at in the future. You guys just you'll have to tell me how deep you want to go into doing this. But we could potentially go into actually tagging users in pictures, things like that. And then again, if you guys want to look at doing things like shorts and stories and things of that nature, then we can look at doing that in the future also. You just gotta let me know. Yeah, so leave comments down below. So anyway, I think that's probably good for now. So this is basically our tables that we'll have. So we're gonna have a database. And that database will be relational. So it's gonna be a standard SQL database, and each of these is going to be what we use to build that. So the next thing that I want to do before we end off is I want to go ahead and jump over to Firefox here, and let's talk about kind of what I'm thinking. So the first thing is I want to have our database. So let's make that color. And we're just going to say database. I'm going to drag this over here. I think that's where I want that for now. But this is where all our tables are going to live, right? Now, we are going to have, from there, we are going to also have some sort of blob storage. So I'm going to move that and I'll give some examples. So let's so again, this database here is where we will have our tables for our users, our posts, etc. that we just talked about. Then we're going to have our blob storage. This is where okay, so I don't like that, so we're just going to say images. Okay, so this is where our blob storage is where we will store our images, right? So again, I mentioned like something like Google Cloud Store or AWS's equivalent. I can't think of its name off the top of my head at the moment, but their equivalent. Azure has their own also. There's plenty of these blob store services that we could use, but those are the big common ones. And so this is where we'll store our images, and then we'll make reference. So I'll kind of draw that out in a second, but let's keep going. So I'm going to draw this again. I want to change the colors here so that they're kind of on their own. Yeah, so I also like to keep things kind of, there we go. Okay, so now I'm gonna call this, I'm just gonna call this application server. Okay. Okay, there we go. And I'm gonna change the color here. Okay. So our application server is where, this is our API. So let me, so any of our business logic that's going to happen for our application is going to live here. This is our server layer, right? So this is where majority of where all of our action is going to happen. Now, in a traditional enterprise application, this is likely going to get broken up into what are called microservices. So we might have like our users service and our posts service and our tags service, right? We might have that, and it would make up like this application layer, this API layer, right? And then there's all sorts of reasons why you might have it this way. Like you might have like tags, for instance, might be communicating with another service that's in charge of like recommendations, right? So we might have some sort of recommendation service that tags talks to, or posts would talk to the recommendation service, but they would probably both be talking, if we're being honest. Posts would be like reading from recommendations, while recommendations is looking at like posts and tags, like the content coming from those, and determining what needs to be fed back to the post service for our web layer, which we haven't really talked about yet. But yeah, it would likely be something like that. But for our use case, we're not going to have any users like the traditional side project. We're not going to have any users. So we're just going to stick with a standard application server, but we'll still look at like structuring our code whenever we write this. We'll still look at it to where if for some reason we ever did want to break it down into microservices, how we could structure it to make that easy to like extract logic into a separate service. So we could do this, and then we could probably get by with this for a while, because we could technically like scale. If we wanted to scale this, we could just split this up and horizontally scale it. Have a couple of extra. We're not going to need much vertical scale because we're probably going to build with either Rust or Golang. I haven't decided what we're going to build with yet, but we could do that, and then and so like there's not much vertical scaling that we would need, so it would be cheap to have each one of these would be cheap, and then we could worry about load. We could worry about load like when we got there, but again, we're not going to have any users, so we can get rid of those. We don't really need to worry about that. So we will have our application server, and this will be in charge of basically any sort of logic that needs to happen, and then it will in turn. Let's go ahead and kind of do this. I want to do it up here though first. Let's so it'll be in charge of reading and writing. And again, there's all sorts of stuff that we could do with this if we were going to scale it, because we might want to have multiple database instances. Like we might want to have some replicas, replica sets where we're like where we're only reading from one, but we write to another one, and what gets written to one gets copied to the other, so that we manage load appropriately. There's all sorts of stuff. And so the other thing that we're going to want to do is our service here is likely going to push to here and pull from here. Actually, it's probably not even going to pull from here. It's probably going to push. I'll make this, I'm going to make this two-way. How do I make it a two-way arrow? I don't know how to make it a two-way arrow. essentially, like, we'll be writing an image so our web layer. Let's before we continue down this route, I want to create our web layer. So I want to create our web layer here. Let's copy this. Can you not? Okay, thank you. And then we'll do that, and we're gonna say client. We'll say I'm gonna do a couple of things here. So I'm gonna say web client, and I'm actually going to shrink this. So let's shrink that, and I'm going to do this for a couple of reasons. But basically, it's so that you can see we could potentially have multiple clients here, right? We could potentially have multiple clients. And so what'll happen is our clients will be writing to our server here, right? They will both write and consume from this server. So our web client here could be our web client here will probably be pushing images and posts, right, to our application server API. And then it'll be reading posts back. It'll be reading our personal, like our user data. If we want to look at like a settings page or something like that, it'll be reading that back. It's where our application server is going to have all of our authentication logic. So like our login, our register, our forgot user, or our forgotten password, all of that will reside on the web client. But the logic for it will actually be here in our application server. And again, that would be like another microservice that we could potentially spin up in the future, is like an authentication service. And anything that our web client does, we may have like a mobile client that's doing the same thing, right? You're probably not going to be using like the web client would still probably be from your mobile phone, right? Like it's still probably going to be, not many people really use I imagine that not many people use Instagram from their desktop or their laptop or what have you. It's probably going to be from a phone. So all of this is, while this is all from a phone, your web client's going to be coming from the browser, whereas your mobile client's going to be coming from the app. And there's things around this, right? Like we could build this just as a mobile app and then have some sort of web experience that basically just like lets you go and update your email or something like that. But in order to post, you actually we could push them towards the mobile client. Reasons for doing that, but whatever. Yeah. That being said, the other thing that we could potentially have that we haven't, I don't even want to think about right now, but I do, but I don't, is, I'm gonna say, let's make that, but let's make them kind of small, is like, is third-party apps. So we could have this also, right? That we could set up to where basically it's not something that we're really thinking about supporting right now, but I have some ideas around this. So basically, like, we could expose our server so that we could technically expose our server to where other people could utilize this API, right? I'm just gonna delete this one because I don't want to draw more. But basically, like, we could enable it to where like someone could do this, right? Like we could have that capability. Again, I have some ideas around that. I don't know for sure that that's something that we're gonna do, but we'll see. is like our web client, our mobile client, they'll be pushing posts to our application server or our API. The API will then take the image and push that into our blob storage, and then the blob storage will then return some form of URL or some form of ID. We'll have to see how we want to do that, because that'll also lend to like how we're going to protect the images, how open we want these to be, etc., etc. But that it would then in turn take that and put that into the database with the post that we make, right? Or with as our profile picture or whatever. That's how that would kind of work. And then whenever we read from that, again, our application server will either provide like a direct URL to those images. Again, that's kind of that may even be more than what we want to think about for our little project here. But for the sake of just kind of talking this through, it could also be just fetching an ID, which then it will send to the blob store through some API call that Google Cloud or AWS or Azure that they make available, that will then return that will then potentially return a URL with a protected URL. So like you can think of this as like some users might not be able to see certain users' images, so we might want to like protect those, and so that might be something. Again, it may not be something that we want to pursue for this, but for the sake of talking, that is a possibility. So something else that we haven't really discussed is like, so we talked about this could horizontally scale. Should we make this public? Maybe we after we build it, we put it out there just for fun to see. Again, maybe we do it for third-party applications to see what you guys are building. Build with it. That's something that I'm thinking about, but I haven't decided. And so like these would move, and we would delete these arrows, because that would still happen. But what we have to do is we have to put this big thing here, which is a load balancer, and then these would do all the same things, but with the load balancer. And this load balancer is going to balance requests to our services here, right? It's going to balance those requests, those requests. It's going to balance those requests so that load gets distributed evenly. And this isn't really something that we will have to do if we ever decide that we're going to make this open. This probably isn't something that we'll handle, at least for the time being. At enterprise scale, definitely something that you have to consider, something that you're probably going to have to manage on your own. But for the sake of what we're doing here, if we ended up doing that, we would probably just rely on some third-party service that's just going to manage scaling our application up and down to the number of services that we want here, and then managing that appropriately with their own internal load balancer. And then the web client will likely live on a CDN, something like Cloudflare, or deployed to like Netlify or Vercel or something, one of those services. Then the mobile client obviously is going to be an app that's run on someone's phone. So yeah, this is all super high level. There's nitty gritty stuff that we could get into, but this. So we may start. I don't know if we're gonna start with the. I don't know what we're gonna start with. I actually may start. I think the next step is going to be another video kind of like this, but to break down the steps that we want to have for building this in some sort of task tracking board. So again, hopefully a task that's gonna ultimately put you to sleep. But yeah, I think that's gonna be the next video. So I think that's gonna wrap this one up. I appreciate you all watching. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. Leave any sort of feedback that you have in the comments, and let me know what you might want to see. I'll probably try to do one of these videos once per week, as well as some form of UI creation video like I've been doing. And then if there's anything else that you all have in mind, just let me know down in the comments, and I will see what I can do. I thank you all for watching. I hope you have sweet dreams.